another episode of the Nolecast, but it'll be show number 2. As we make our way through our positional preview series, want to thank good people at Louisiana Hot Sauce, been with us since we started doing these preview series, and have been a fantastic supporter of the Nolecast, and somebody that I have to kind of pinch myself and realize that I get to brag on a product that I really, truly, legitimately love, a product that we had kind of joked about the year before getting sponsored by, and ultimately, sometimes jokes/dreams come true, and they've been nothing but a great partner for us, and certainly appreciate all the support, whether it be in a grocery store or social media, that our listeners have given them in the 6 years that we've partnered with them now. I mean, it's kind of wild that a team-specific podcast has a national food sponsor, but we're very lucky and always want to tip our hat to them.
I mean, not to brag, but like most team-specific podcasts do not do national type podcast numbers like we do.
No, they
which
don't.
Is fair. Also, thank you to Tarpon Cellars. Tremendous support for the Nolecast as well. If you want to get your lady a nice gift, or if you're a dude and you also enjoy a nice bottle of wine, please hit up Tarpon Cellars. Make sure to visit them as well. Let's get into the running back position preview here. I put rushers preview, but there's really no fullbacks officially that they use. They kind of drag some tight ends down for that. So pretty much just running backs and tailbacks. And I say we get into this thing. As there's always the format like we've been doing on these, we try to go 15 to 20 minutes. For the receivers preview, we went like 45. So again, got to move, I guess. We're going to talk a little about what we had last year and where David Hale has them ranked, if we think that's fair. And then we'll discuss how they can possibly exceed his ranking and take a little look also at what our thoughts are for beyond 2021, something that I feel like we can go back and review after the season. Hint, hint. So might do a little recycling of content there. Ingram, last year, FSU basically none of their running backs were any good until Jordan Travis came in and sprung them and made the defense really respect the most special athlete on FSU's offense last year, which was Jordan Travis. They actually had some pretty decent run totals overall, but out of the 1,796 yards that FSU rushed for against FBS opponents, only 546 came before garbage time. So they were doing a whole lot of running when teams didn't care that they were running. Basically, they're like, "Yeah, guess what? Yeah, we're up 30. You want to run the ball? Cool." And they were exciting in doing it, but really, that's why this offense ranked as poorly as it did in a lot of the advanced metrics that strip out stuff that you do once the game is already decided. I have some questions here, man, and we'll get to them. But I have to say, they really didn't lose anybody all that significant off last year's team, with the exception of LaDamian Webb, who actually had some decent productivity ultimately last year. I mean, 207 rush yards in non-garbage time. He was effective against North Carolina. I know he had a 46 yarder that he ripped off. I think he had a 54 yarder, a 16 yarder against Notre Dame before that game got out of hand, and he was a real workhorse against Georgia Tech. But other than that, I just feel like this lane is wide open for somebody to come and take the reins. What does David Hale think?
Yeah, so David Hale has Florida State at 4th. Now, this is interesting. Also, almost certainly has to include Jordan Travis and what he brought to the run game. I'll be honest with you, bud. We've talked about doing these series for about a week or so, and this is the one that I've struggled the most with because I don't know how to project what the run game is going to look like based off what your quarterback is. And it's going to be such a dynamic shift as to if the defense has to, account for one of the more explosive rushers or in some advanced analytics, one of the more explosive rushers in college football, or a guy who still looks like he's got a little bit of decent spring in his step, but certainly McKenzie's not going to be the run threat that he was or what Jordan Travis is. So Webb had some nice moments. When I go back and watch the games, there are some moments where I look and go, damn, that's going to be a guy that's missed. But, you've got Jashaun Corbin coming back, a guy that I've long been slightly more optimistic about what he might be this year. I think he can continue to, add a little bit of explosiveness to his game and will be a pretty solid contributor. And he's probably where the conversation needs to start as far as what the 2021 pieces look like.
Yeah, I was similarly surprised as you about Hale ranking them fourth. Again, we use David Hale's rankings in the league because he's the guy who I honestly feel just covers the league as a whole to try to provide that outside perspective about where you think, all of these teams rank. We can tell you a lot about FSU's guys. We can tell you some about the rest of the league. I feel like Hale has a pretty good view of the entirety of the league, and that's just kind of how we decided to frame things in this year's preview series because he was nice enough to do it. My initial reaction was the same as you. It was like, what? Fourth? But I look at it, of the teams behind FSU in his rankings, Louisville, NC State, Va Tech, Wake, Miami, Duke, UVA, BC, Pitt, Cuse. I think you can argue that Miami's backs are better if you want to. I think you can argue that NC State's backs with Bam Knight and those guys are better. But I don't think he's necessarily way off. This is a league that lost a lot of running back talent. And other than that, they return a whole lot of talent elsewhere. So it is interesting to me. But I think you may have nailed this Jashaun Corbin thing a year in advance. I was more skeptical on FSU taking him as a transfer. I was like, I don't know, with that kind of freak hamstring injury that he had at A&M, would he have the burst that we saw at a high school that made him a very coveted prospect down the stretch of his senior year? And last year, he didn't show it, man. He was not an explosive runner last year at all. I'm going to pull up here real briefly. What were here? Here are his rush lengths again against FBS teams before garbage time. 12, 2, 2, 5, 5, 2, -1, 4, 5, 3, 2, 6, 2, 4, 1.
Pretty pedestrian. Yeah.
Yeah. However, all reports are that he looks better this fall. And those are from people who I trust, like guys who actually are paid by FSU to be on the staff.
Right.
And they're like, no, I think Corbin will take a jump. I think he's in better shape. I think he trusts his legs more. And Ingram, I mean, it may be a little early to take a victory lap here, but I think that you may have really nailed this thing.
Well, I'll give it some time before I do that. But Corbin's a nice kid, good program guy by all accounts, and has put in a pretty significant summer. And just as we were talking about with Helton, some of those injuries take a little bit more time to recover, and it doesn't mean that you can't play 1 year after the injury. But 2 years removed from it, you might see a little bit more explosive, a little bit more pop. And again, I don't think he's going to be a second day draft pick or something like that based off this year. But I do think that Corbin could be a much better player than maybe some expect him to be, if nothing else, based off what they saw last year. So reasonable expectations.
Now, you said explosive. One thing we've seen is explosive growth with our partnership with the legendary team, Legendary Home Loans. Shannon and Chad just do a tremendous job. I see you laughing. For those of y'all who might be new to the show, we try to basically one-up each other with these transitions into the ad reads each week. And sometimes, I was talking to Chad, and he was like, you guys be 45 seconds into an ad read. I don't really realize you're reading me an ad. But 844 FSU Loan, we are closing in on 200 Nolecast listeners, or I guess viewers now too, since we're on YouTube. Come find us, who have decided to go with Legendary Team. That's pretty incredible. Over our 3-year relationship, 844 FSU Loan is the number to call. Tremendous customer service, great rates, knowledge of the industry, and they want to work with you to get your loan. So speaking of explosive as well, Lawrence Taufili is a dude who I think now look, I'm not going to lie, I think fourth in the ACC as far as rushers here, especially if we're just talking about the backs, probably going to be hard to top. I don't know that there's that much upward mobility for this group in that regard. But if there is, it's because Lawrence Taufili, a very skinny, slasher, a guy who was pretty highly rated coming out of high school, and somebody the staff was high on, it's because he is able to hit more explosive plays for this team and translate that speed into some true, home run shots. I think he could be I think Corbin's a good screen guy, but obviously Toafili has the ability to be a screen guy who can take it the distance. And I think he has, I don't know, man. I don't think of him just as one of these dudes who wants to bounce everything and the guy who in Pop Warner ball turned everything to a sweep, turned the corner and hit the Jets. I mean, he may have, but at some point he learned how to show a little bit of vision inside. And I don't think he's that unnatural of a runner there. And that was encouraging to see. It would be more encouraging to me if he actually put on some bulk and wasn't still as skinny as he is. But ultimately, I think you have to feel pretty good about these two being decent backs in the conference.
Yeah. A slasher is a good description. A guy that can make somebody miss, not necessarily, somebody that's going to hit the corner and be the fastest guy on the field. So interesting skill set there. I'm trying to come up with a historical comparison. I mean, I'm hesitant to compare anybody to Amp Lee, but somewhat of a similar game there if you want to go, 20, 22 years back. But a guy that, maybe you see that develop a little bit in the weight room. If you see, leg development, you may see a little bit of an uptick in just straight line speed there. But a guy who's certainly good at making people miss in the open field. You're right, has the ability to be a big play candidate in the screen game and, decent patch catching skills for a back and somebody that I think will be fairly well utilized in that regard, regardless of who the quarterback is.
So next guy I want to talk about here is DJ Williams, a transfer from Auburn. Man, I have a hard time getting a feel for what DJ Williams actually is because in the spring, he just looked thoroughly unimpressive. And if you didn't know anything about him, you would say, why is FSU using a scholarship on this kid as a transfer? Didn't look like he was, very quick. Didn't necessarily run with a ton of power. I think he might have been a little banged up in the spring. As I pull up some of his numbers from Auburn, let me know where you are on DJ.
It's an interesting take. Certainly has some great film. Has a game against LSU that's really good. But you can't constantly refer to that when you're talking about a kid. I did see DJ. I was down in Tallahassee last week. I saw DJ. Looks to me like he's lost a little bit of weight. Looks like he's kind of reshaped his body as well. So will be interesting to see what that translates on the field. I mean, a guy who's kind of I don't want to say run towards contact, but not afraid of it. Will probably hold that to an extent some, but maybe not the thumper that it would have looked like he would have been. Never a real big physical guy, but just kind of a low center of gravity. Some of the key words that people use for running backs that aren't, completely shredded. I don't know, man. I think he's I would not label him as a big back currently based off what I saw. Now, I saw the kid for 10 seconds. I don't want to make too many extrapolations based off that, but it's an interesting take. It certainly has the ability to pay dividends for you, but I am very curious as to what his role is this year.
Yeah, I'm also curious here. The reason he left Auburn, I have to assume, is because Tank Bigsby is at Auburn. And he's not going to beat out Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby is probably a legitimate NFL back. But, DJ out of high school was a pretty intriguing guy. There were a lot of very mixed opinions on him. As a recruit, he did show some very high upside ability. And at times at Auburn, he kind of showed that. He's had some real flashes there. But so far at FSU, I don't think he's had those same level of flashes. And, we'll have to see if he can pan out for them. What is his role going to be? As you said, he's lost some weight. He's still got to be bigger than Corbin and Toafili, though. So, can he provide you some of that power if you need him to? Is he in better shape now? I don't think he's somebody who is a terrible catcher of the football. So, I just don't know how he fits in, and I'm There's a lot of times where I feel like I know and I say it, but in this case, I really don't know how this is going to work.
Yeah. I think we're somewhat in agreement there. I still think if it's third down and you're at the 1.5, I think Corbin's probably getting the ball at this point. Now, coaching staff knows that better than I do as to how they project kids. It'll be interesting. I think DJ. I don't want to label him a bad take, but it's an interesting one. Certainly one that you could, theoretically recruit over pretty quickly and would want to see Florida State do that. But
if he doesn't pan out.
Yeah, if he doesn't turn into the flashes that you saw at Auburn. Absolutely. So curious story there. Guy with a decent amount of upside. It will be interesting to see how much of that and what we see from him this year. So a little bit of a mystery.
He may turn into an all-star, right?
And everything is possible with DJ Williams. I mean, this could go in all sorts of directions.
You knew he turned into an all-star?
Did Matt Lewis did Matt Lewis's son turn into an all-star?
He did.
Yes, he did. He did. Matt Lewis and his team at Congruity have been with us for a year now. Just talking with him. 4 different people have chosen to partner up with the good people. It's really kind of white glove service what they give, and you get that small business attention to detail with all the resources that are necessary to kind of compete in that field. CongruityHR.com is the website. Matt Lewis could be reached via email, Noles, Noles @CongruityHR.com. And we want to thank Matt and his team for the support that they've given us.
And certainly a wide variety of services. I was speaking with one of the gentlemen who chose to partner with Matt. And, he spoke about how he's actually in charge of opening their stateside division of their business since they're European based. And Matt and his team were able to accommodate them and work with them every step of the way. So if you have a complex business need or even a simple one or any kind of custom one, something in between, give them a shout. You see the email on the screen, Noles@CongruityHR.com. Last guy I want to talk about here for the main group would be Treyshawn Ward. And Treyshawn Ward is somebody who I think we should pat ourselves on the back for because we talked about him on signing day, 2 years ago, I think, when we said, look, they're going to get this kid as a walk-on, but he is, a Power 5 quality back. And it's a very valuable play as a walk-on, guy with some decent speed. He does run hard. Now, I think his value is probably as a walk-on. They went ahead and gave him a scholarship. So if you want to talk value of the scholarship and whatnot and the allocation of scarce resources and goal economics, maybe for the long term, that's not the best solution. I don't know that he ever is going to be a starter for the Noles. But ultimately, if he's your 4th back this year, I think that's mostly okay. You could put him in, and I don't think he would absolutely kill you, which is good. But he's certainly not somebody you want to take 100+ carries.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the main 4 that we'll look at. Again, I'll kind of be redundant here, but this is a position group that I struggle. I mean, I know the pieces fairly well, with the exception of Williams is a little bit of a question mark. But it's hard to project what this group will look like because you have to take into account what the defense's changes will be when they don't have to key on the quarterback as a runner and account for that kind of extra blocker that gets created by it. And then you have to try to figure out, well, if you are going to play McKenzie and you are going to make the assumption that the passing game will be better, then how does that offset for the loss of Travis not being in there? It's a little bit of a challenge to try to figure out, what this will look like and how defenses will adjust accordingly. And, we'll talk about this more when we get to the quarterback position, but I, at the same time, expect those 2 guys to be on the same field a decent amount in and of itself. So a little bit of a complicated position to try to project.
Yeah, man. So I agree with the general thought that if the run game shouldn't slip too much, if the defense has to respect the pass. But man, Mackenzie Milton better be a whole hell of a lot better throwing the ball than Jordan Travis was if you want to get enough defensive respect for the pass game with this receiver group and this quarterback group to where they're able to run the ball as effectively with their backs. I want to share something here. So again, non-garbage time against FBS teams, success rate. Jordan Travis, 64%. Jashaun Corbin, 39%. Webb, 33%. And again, this is scrambles removed. So these are only design runs, not, drop back, scramble around. I've stripped those out for this stat. Jordan Travis, 64%. Jashaun Corbin, 39%. That is an enormous drop-off. It cannot be overstated. I know I tweeted this from the Nolecast account on Monday night, but I am very interested to see what happens with the run game here. And yes, passing is more efficient if you can do it, but you don't want to be sort of, jack of all trades, master of none. They clearly have to be able to pass if they want to beat like the 5 teams in the coaches poll that came out today that are ranked. 5 ranked opponents, by the way, all in the top 20. That's whew. But man, I think you could beat some of these other teams with just running more of the Jordan Travis offense if you get some defensive improvement. Jordan Wilson, as we spoke about in the pass catchers preview, also is going to have to play a major role in this as a blocker, as will potential improvement from the offensive line. But this is like my number one question for the position. Are these guys going to be anywhere near as effective as they were if Travis isn't in there and the defense having to account for him? Because I would much rather have Jordan Travis hand the ball off to these guys than keep it himself. He's a better athlete than all these guys.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just something that we're going to have to see a lot of questions there in general. Like I said, the role of Travis, how he's used, and what it looks like. And at the same time, like I said, I think you'll see both of those guys on the field at the same time, and that will be a little bit of an extra wrinkle and, perhaps more challenging to defend. But also, you lose some numbers when you put 2 guys on the field that are theoretically quarterbacks as well. So with that, we'll kind of briefly turn our focus to beyond 2021. Corey Wren is the main name that we'll talk about here. Redshirt freshman after a COVID year, a guy who really fast. Other than that, kind of a little bit of an unknown. I mean, you think some of the high school tape suggests an ability to catch the ball out of the field. You think you'll be kind of creative with him. Obviously, some of the mismatches you can get if you get a safety or linebacker on a back, you have to be excited about what you can do with Wren. But I think he'll certainly play a role, but I don't expect to see a ton of him in 2021.
Yeah, I think with him, again, it's can he do more than just run fast? We'll see. Like, that's the challenge. The reason the staff took him is because of that great speed, because that track speed. We see it all the time in football. Sometimes these guys don't work out, right? They stay fast, but they don't do other things. But when it works, it's beautiful. When it works, it changes the numbers on the scoreboard. And, there are a lot of times these guys just fall by the wayside, but then occasionally you have a Kermit Whitfield who can be a gadget guy. And if the gadget pops, all of a sudden it's 80 yards. So I think they'll continue to invest in Corey Wren, see if he can start to catch the football better and, just kind of understand the intricacies of the game of football a little bit better. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see, what they have coming for him. Also really excited, by the way, to get back to Madison Social and Township. Notre Dame game coming up. Going to throw back a few there. Maybe chat with a couple of Nolecast listeners, bounce around a little bit, and talk about the upcoming season. I'm pumped for it. Get up there. It's an awesome place to go. They've supported us since day one. Great food, drink specials all the time. It's more a restaurant during the day. Late night turns into more of a hop and bar scene. Nice little hybrid model. Like they can do everything, and they really do everything well.
I mentioned I was in Tallahassee last week. I think I was like the first guy in the door at Matso at 11:15 or something like that, and sat at the bar, had some chicken fingers or what do they call it on chicken fingers with some fantastic Peruvian green sauce there.
Oh, the Peruvian sauce is legit.
Yeah, it's fantastic and a great restaurant, like you said. And Bud and I I've been talking with Matt some. We're going to try to do something, maybe the Louisville game. We still have to kind of nail down a Nolecast listener event, but we will do something. We've talked about the challenges for the Notre Dame game. Won't do it that weekend. We will be there, but we won't have any kind of a event in an official capacity. But to circle back to the running back, somewhat of a similar take here that we talked about with the wide receivers, that you're not going to kill it in the 2022 class, just both that there's not a ton of prospects that you're kind of a natural fit for, whether it be, geographic location or otherwise. 2023, you're going to have to hit pretty hard in the recruiting trail and do well at a position that Florida State hasn't done a fantastic job of recruiting. And you got a lot of names here on the sheet that still have 2, 3, and 4 years left to play. So I don't know that they would be involved in the transfer market, but maybe or the transfer portal. But if maybe one of these guys washes out and you have a chance to grab a significant player, I wouldn't rule out them at least, keeping one eye open to add a legitimate running back via transfer portal. So
I got to tell you, man, the transfer portal has really changed the way you recruit sometimes if you feel like you can't go get an elite player. And they're just really not in on anybody elite this year in recruiting at the running back position. You have Rodney Hill, who shut down his position, his recruitment, kind of a hybrid guy. Glover committed to Utah, which is very interesting in my opinion. I don't know, never really been all that high on him. And it is weird. People were getting on us when we were not that high on him, right? And then when he decided to come into Utah,
you got to dunk on UF first for not getting him. Although
this is correct,
they may have passed on him, but still hilarious that a kid spent as much time there and then ultimately chose Utah. But
as Newberg pointed out, but there are some guys in the 2023 class that they're in on. I know they're in on Richard Young out of Lehigh. We'll see how that goes. He's clearly the game changer if they can get him.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll have playing time to sell. The real key in that one is going to be, taking step forwards on the field this year and, taking steps forward with the offensive line play and really having something that you want to run behind. And that's going to be one of those big boy battles you got to fight, along with some other ones coming up, I'm sure, where you're not beating out an NC State and a Louisville for a kid. You're having to go out and beat a Bama and an Ohio State and a Georgia. And that'll predicate, in many cases, how these guys look this year. This is one of those positions where, I'm really not sure what the answers are going to be, but I am pretty sure of the questions. And that's the reason why we decided to make it one of our first in the Nolecast season preview series. I'm fascinated to see how this turns out, dude.
Yep. Yeah. Like we said, there's some pieces that you feel fairly confident about. Corbin will be maybe the story of the year, Corbin and Toafili ultimately as he emerges. Some nice pieces at the same time. Like you said, still looking to add a game-changing back to this roster. And, maybe these two guys are able to feature in a manner that you can have a little bit more of a dynamic sales pitch in the, 2023 kids that you're chasing after.
No doubt. All right, man. I'll see you next time.